Hi everyone, we are back on our YouTube channel, Raid OverSimplified. If you watched the Sacred Shard opening video from last weekend, I pulled a Royal Huntsman, and at a later point in that video, I talked about how I would probably build him for Faction War. I was going to procrastinate a little bit longer on that until I came back from Happy Hour yesterday and saw that High Elves were one of the two factions of the day that had their crypts open. So I put him on the expedited track to 6 stars. I had some spirit potion to ascend him, and just really quickly did enough masteries specifically to get Cycle of Violence. I always thought that my High Elves team had really good potential in Faction War, but I was previously stuck on stage 18 because I didn't have a nuker. The Royal Guard that you may have seen in the Sacred Shards video was the first ever Royal Guard I pulled, and then a few minutes later, obviously I pulled this guy. So Royal Huntsman is going to get built first. So for stage 19 that we're starting off with, because I was playing on my iPad and sometimes the screen recorder doesn't save correctly, so I lost 18 that way. But it doesn't really matter, all three stages are really similar. I would say probably to, I don't know, 99th percentile, basically, just long, boring, repetitive, and dangerous. I've been wanting to make a Faction War video for a while now because everything I see on YouTube are typically stage 12 to 14, which to me is just not very helpful. Faction War is without a doubt the hardest PvE content in the game right now. If you're struggling in an earlier stage, that's perfectly normal. I am too in most factions. I'm just not going to build a custom tailored team for a particular stage because I saw it on YouTube just to beat a stage or two in that mid-range. Because 6-starring takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and you also have to gear them and such. I'm just not willing to make the investment unless it fits into one or two criteria. Either I have another area of the game that I'm using the champion in, or I know that champion will be useful all the way to where 6-star glyphs become drops, which is stage 18 and above. At 20, the lowest that can drop is actually 4-star, which is really nice. They're basically all useful at that point. This is just my personal opinion though. If you decide to build or are building a team to farm a mid-range stage, that's entirely your prerogative. I myself am stage 1 in like 3 factions, namely Orcs, Bannerlords, just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's another, I think Undeads, because the long-term goal I have for this is to put a serious team together faction by faction. And I just don't have what I need in those factions, and I clearly know that. Maybe those factions just don't have what's necessary to complete this content right now, and that's entirely possible. I'm honestly not sure that every faction do. This is actually the very first faction I was able to complete stage 20 without having to rely on some serious gimmicks, namely block damage and unkillable, which I know is controversial right now, and I'm sure some of you guys have some very strong opinions about that, but it's just not something we're going to get into here. In terms of this team comp, I'm currently using Beast 5. There's not a whole lot to say, just everyone hustling their hardest to not die and to allow Royal Huntsman to do some damage. I think if there's one word I would use as associate with getting through Faction War right now, it would be hustle, because every faction is so different, and while the stages you face is shared amongst a few factions, but I think there's still at least 4 different variances or different versions of these stages. So my strategy right now really is just to have my champs do whatever they can and hope it works. This team isn't exactly heavily theorized or theory crafted. There's definitely no crazy combos like using a frenzy set to soak up damage in exchange for turn meter to cleanse your team or anything crazy like that. It's just what I think is the best team I can thrown together. I don't know what most of these champions I'm facing here actually do. I know some of the obvious ones like Cold Heart's dangerous, Zargala, Blind Seer, obviously, but the vast majority of them, I have no idea what they do. I'm just picking targets based on affinity and what looks to me like it may be dangerous, right? Like Baker Mayfield wakes up feeling dangerous. Totally judging the books by their cover here, but this is the best I can do at the moment just because I don't really know how to look them up. I guess you can go through the index and match the images, but that just sounds like a lot of work. As I mentioned earlier, I also just came back from happy hour when I was doing this last night. So I was basically making decisions in a haze with woeful ignorance. If someone much smarter than me wants to undertake the task of figuring out which champs these are in each wave and list them and note if they do anything particularly dangerous, I think you would be doing a tremendous favor, right? Making a huge contribution to the community in general. There was something on stage 19 wave 3 that was decreasing my team's max HP with every hit. I thought that was really dangerous because I'm relying so heavily on revives, but I was able to eventually catch on to it and knock that one out. I've noticed that people really love to ask about gear in the comments. I wrote a pretty long-winded post on the channel page basically saying that I'm more than happy to tell you what my gearing concepts are, but I'm not going to always show the exact numbers because it's far too easy for people to look at a video, you know, a still image, and get so pigeonholed into thinking that's the baseline that they need, and that discourages them from trying to do that on their own and figuring out what actually it is that they need. I will show the stats when I think they're absolute baselines, just tipping point between making and breaking a team, like well over 400 resistance on Scarred Horses to resist Hegemon, for example. I think it's absolutely necessary, while most of the time they're not. For this team that I'm using here, Arbiter, Lysandra, Shiramani are all on their arena gear, so just speed, accuracy, defense HP. Tyrell is in his UNM gear with lifesteal and speed. Royal Huntsman I have on Toxic, literally, because I didn't want to engear any of my other nukers. I wish I had a reflex set for him to utilize that A3 better, but I hate farming Golem due to the artifact storage limit. Toxic is fine. It procs Arcane Celerity for some extra turn cycling, which is really nice. If you're wondering if another champion will work in this comp instead of XYZ, I have absolutely no idea. This is the first time I'm running these stages with high elves, and as you can see, I barely even know what I'm doing. When it comes to faction war, and just really in general, but particularly when it comes to faction war, I find it completely irresponsible to comment on champions based on skill descriptions if I don't have them, and I find it both irrational and just completely asinine if you listen and believe those who do, because they don't know what the multipliers are. The game doesn't always tell you everything about an ability in the descriptions, and unless they're consistently farming stage 21, they're just making guesses on what kind of counter mechanism is really necessary to complete this content. I would never place any confidence in someone else's baseless guess. That doesn't make any sense to me, and what worse about that is that when incomplete information is believed and repeated, it just festers into a cycle of ignorance. There's a lot of people out there also that simply enjoys making irrational and irresponsible statements for the sake of making them. Like when I pulled Candrathon, people were sending me their condolences on Discord and just in the game chat, but they don't actually realize that he is a complete monster in faction war because they're not at that point. That stream of consciousness rant probably went on a little bit longer than I expected. But anyway, that's the conclusion of this video. Thanks for watching. I will upload these two marathon fights in regular speed as unlisted YouTube videos and link them in the description as an addendum to this video. I hope you are enjoying the grind and have a great day.